For decades, a single word and a single root vegetable whispered that two worlds had touched across an empty ocean, and nobody could prove it. Start with a puzzle that refused to die. In the Polynesian archaeological record, researchers kept finding things that shouldn't be there. New World crops like the sweet potato and the bottle gourd, plants native to the Americas, thousands of kilometers of open ocean away. Proponents of pre-Columbian contact pointed to them as proof that people had crossed that ocean. Critics pushed back. The plants, they argued, could have dispersed on their own, without any human hand. Then there was the word. The Polynesian name for sweet potato is kūmara, and in the Andes, in Quechua terms from Peru and Bolivia, you find kumar and kūmara. Linguists had long treated that resemblance as a hint, a fingerprint of human transfer, a memory of contact preserved in language itself. But a resemblance is not evidence. A crop is not a handshake. For over a century, the question hung in the air. Had Polynesians and Native Americans ever actually met? And if they had, when, where, and who reached whom? Nobody could say. The ocean kept its secret. Part 1. A century of wrong answers. The mystery was old, and it had produced some strange answers. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, theorists placed Maori origins all over the map, in South America, in North America, in India, even in Egypt. These were guesses dressed as history, and they were wrong. The actual ancestral trail of Polynesians runs the other way, from around Taiwan, down through Melanesia, and out across the Pacific in one of the greatest feats of navigation the human species has ever attempted. But into that vacuum of hard evidence stepped one of the 20th century's most famous adventurers. Thor Heyerdahl argued that South American populations had helped settle East Polynesia and Rapa Nui. The Kon-Tiki thesis, that the islands were peopled from the Americas drifting west. It was a controversial claim, and mostly rejected. Yet here is the tension. What if Heyerdahl was wrong about the direction and the mechanism, but right that these two worlds had somehow touched? To answer that, you couldn't rely on a raft, or a word, or a tuber. You needed something that leaves a permanent record inside living people. You needed DNA. But even the DNA, when researchers first looked, would not agree with itself. Part 2. The Smoking Gun Misfires. For years, the sweet potato had felt like the closest thing to proof, the botanical smoking gun. If this American plant was growing in Polynesia before Europeans arrived, someone must have carried it there. Then, in 2018, that gun misfired. An Oxford-led study examined the earliest Polynesian sweet potato specimen and found it was a distinct variety, one that likely arose before humans ever colonized the region. In other words, the plant may have reached Polynesia entirely without human help, drifting or dispersing on its own. The genetic study challenged the whole idea that the crop's presence proved early human contact. Overnight, the strongest physical clue looked shaky. The word kūmara still lingered, tantalizing, but a word alone convinces no one. So the mystery didn't just survive, it deepened. The critics seemed vindicated. Two ocean-going peoples, each masters of the sea, and still not a single hard thread connecting them. And yet the deepest evidence of contact would never be found in a plant or a place name. It would be written in the bodies of the people themselves, if only someone knew how to read it. Part 3. Reading the bodies. That is exactly what a team led by Alexander Ioannidis set out to do, publishing their results in Nature in 2020. Instead of chasing crops, They went to the source: people. The study analyzed genome-wide variation in individuals from Polynesian island populations and from Pacific Coast Native American groups, over 800 people in all. The logic was simple and unforgiving. If Polynesians and Native Americans had ever mixed, their descendants would carry fragments of that meeting in their chromosomes, segments of Native American DNA stitched into an otherwise Polynesian genome. The catch was scale. Any such signal, after so many centuries, would be faint, a whisper against the noise, and there was a warning from earlier work that this trail could mislead. A 2014 study of modern Rapa Nui Islanders had found about 8% Native American DNA, inferring contact before 1500. But then, in 2017, a study of 5 pre-European Rapa Nui individuals found only Polynesian DNA, no American signal at all. 2 studies, 2 answers. So which was it? Had the two worlds met, or hadn't they? The new analysis was about to settle a question that had defied everyone for more than 100 years. Part 4. The signal in the genome. They found it, a faint but unmistakable Native American genetic signal, sitting inside the genomes of Eastern Polynesians. This was the conclusive evidence: prehistoric contact between Polynesians and Native Americans around AD 1200, centuries before any European set sail into the Pacific. But the real power was in the detail. The Native American DNA segments were short, and they were nearly identical across the different islands. That pattern is a signature. Short matching segments spread across separate populations point not to constant back-and-forth traffic, but to a single ancient contact event, one meeting long ago, whose genetic echo then spread as people moved between islands. This single contact model says the mixing happened once, and then rippled outward, rather than through repeated voyages over generations. And the team could go further still. They could ask which Native American population the signal most closely matched. The answer reached back to the Pacific coast of South America, to a specific pre-Columbian people. But even more surprising than who was involved was where the meeting first left its mark. The obvious candidate turned out to be wrong. Part 5. Fatu Hiva, not Easter Island. The Native American population most closely related to the signal is the Zenú of Colombia, a Pacific Coast pre-Columbian people. And the ancestry didn't stay in one spot. It appeared on Palliser, on the Marquesas, on Mangareva, and on Rapa Nui. Now, common sense would point to Rapa Nui, Easter Island, as the first meeting place. It is the Polynesian island closest to South America, the natural stepping stone, the place Heyerdahl fixated on. But the genetics said otherwise. Rapa Nui was not the initial contact point. Its American ancestry likely arose elsewhere in Polynesia first, and only later reached the island. So where did it begin? The earliest admixture traced to Fatu Hiva in the South Marquesas, around AD 1150, remarkably, a date that predates the current archaeological settlement, estimates for that very island. Think about what that means. Somewhere in the 12th century, on the shores of a remote volcanic island in the middle of the Pacific, indigenous seafarers from 2 continents met and left behind descendants who carry that encounter to this day. Genetic analysis suggests South Americans may have traveled to Polynesia around 800 years ago. The empty ocean, it turns out, was never quite as empty as it looked. Part 6. What the ocean remembered. So what does the evidence actually settle? And what does it leave open? It confirms the fact of contact, that these were extraordinary navigators, on both sides of the Pacific, capable of feats we are still struggling to fully imagine. It reframes Heyerdahl's old claim rather than simply confirming it. The meeting was real, but the story is richer and stranger than a raft drifting west. The genetics does not crown one people over another, and it should not be read that way. It tells of an encounter, a single ancient meeting whose direction, its full human texture, remains partly beyond what short DNA segments can reveal. There is honest uncertainty here worth holding on to. The exact roots, the intentions, the number of people, the lives lived in that moment 8 centuries ago. Those things the genome cannot fully recover. What it can do is honor the memory that the crops hinted at, and the word kūmara seemed to carry all along, that long before Columbus, 2 indigenous ocean-going peoples found each other across the largest emptiness on Earth. The proof was inside them the entire time. We simply learned, at last, how to listen. If any part of this story of ancestry, identity, or belonging stirs something difficult, you don't have to sit with it alone. Reaching out to a trusted friend, community elder, or a local mental health or crisis support line can help.